part 1 of your Chapter 3 study guide. For problem number 1, your first step would be to use the distributive property. It's important when you're distributing to pay attention to the minus sign, or think of it as a negative. Negative 0.2 times 4 is negative 0.8. And negative 0.2 times a negative x will be a positive 0.2x. Now we'll bring everything else down. Our next step would be to combine any like terms. So here we're going to put our variables together. 2 plus 0.2x will be 2.2x. And then bring everything else down. Now, the goal is to get the variable by itself, which is right here. So next we'll add 0.8 to both sides of the equation. So that leaves us with 2.2x equals 3.6. Our final step is to divide to get the x by itself. Now when we divide this, we're going to get a repeating decimal. Our final answer is 1.6, and then it's looking like the 3.6 is going to repeat. Okay, problem number 2 looks a bit complicated because of the fractions involved here. I'm going to use the strategy where you clear the denominator. And since 20 is the biggest denominator, and 5 goes into 20 and 2 goes into 20, I can multiply the whole equation by 20 to help simplify this. So 20 divided by 5 becomes 4. And then I would still have the x plus 2. And that gets rid of the divide by 5. Then 20 times 1 divided by 2 would give us 10. And then over here, when I do 16 times 20 divided by 20, that just cancels out the 20s, and we're left with 16. So now this looks a lot easier to work with. Now we're going to use the distributive property again to get rid of the parentheses. So that would be 4x plus 8 plus 10 equals 16. And now I can combine like terms right here. That's just 18. 4x plus 18 equals 16. And now we have a two-step equation. So I can subtract 18 on both sides. And that leaves us with 4x equals negative 2. And then finally, to get the x by itself, it's divide by 4. So our answer is x equals negative 2 divided by 4, which would simplify one more step to x equals negative 1/2. Okay, to convert fractions to decimals, you could use your calculator, and in that case you would fill the screen with 0.3 until you couldn't fill it anymore. And then you would hit the second function, and then you would select the PRB button and then hit enter, and that'll change it to a fraction for you. Or you could think of this as if it didn't have the repeating button, it's 3/10, and since it's repeating, it's 3 out of 9, and then you would just simplify that. Let's see, we can divide the top and the bottom by 3, so that simplifies to 1/3. Then number 4 is similar. You could fill the screen just like we did here. You can fill your calculator screen with 0.45, 45, 45, 45, as many as it can hold, and then hit the second function, then the PRB button, and it'll convert for you. Or since this, I would also look at this as 45 in the hundredths place to be a repeating decimal, it's 45 in the 99th place. And then I would try to reduce that. And I can see that I could use 9. I could divide the numerator and the denominator by 9, and that would leave me with 5/11ths. Okay, for question number 5, we have to solve it, show our work, and then determine if our final answer is a 1 solution, no solution, or infinite solutions. And this looks a little complex, but I might try to do distributive property first and then see what we're left with here. So -1/8 times 16. So that would be -16 divided by 8. That gives us -2x. And then -1/8 times -2. Okay, a negative times a negative would be a positive, so that would be 2/8, which would reduce to 1/4. So positive 1/4. Okay, so then we have 2 on this side. Okay, now if I look at these, it looks like it's almost similar, like twins. It looks like it could be infinite, but I need to get the variables together and the constants together to see for sure. So here's my equal sign. So our next step, we could add 2x to both sides. And I see here that cancels out, and we're left with 4x minus a fourth equals a fourth. Then we would subtract a fourth from both sides, or I'm sorry, add a fourth to both sides. And then this cancels out, so we're left with 4x equals 1/4 plus 1/4 would be 2/4, or a half. And then our final step would be to divide both sides by 4 to get the x by itself. So a half divided by a 4, that would leave us with 1/8. So we got x by itself. So because we were able to get x by itself and get one solution for this problem, we would say that this is a one solution problem. Okay, same directions, determining if it's one solution, no solution, or infinite solutions. It looks like we're going to have to use the distributive property on both sides of this equation to get us going here. Alright, so 2 times 4a is 8a, and 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times a is 2a, and 2 times a -6 would be -12. Okay, now when I look at both sides of the equation, they don't look alike at all. So let's see what happens when we get our variables together. I'm going to subtract 2a on both sides, and that leaves us with 6a plus 4 equals a -12. Now we have a two-step equation. So let's subtract 4 on both sides. And that leaves us with 6a equals -16. And we'll divide by 6 for our final step to get the a by itself. And then I'm going to use my calculator here. 16 divided by 6. A negative divided by positive, we'll get a -2.6 repeating. Okay, so here again we were able to get the a by itself. And since you are able to get an answer, and only one answer for this equation, this is another example of an equation with one solution. Okay, last one of this type. Again, we've got distributive property going on both sides, so we're going to distribute first. Okay, so 0.5 times 6, or half of 6, that's going to be 3x, and 0.5 times -3, or half of 3, it's going to be negative 1.5. And then on the other side, half of 6, that gives us 3. And then half of 6x, that gives us 3x. Okay, let's see. Let's get our variables together. Subtract 3x. Okay, this is interesting. Look at this cancels out and this cancels out. So we are left with negative 1.5 equals 3. So then I would be asking true or false. Does negative 1.5 equal 3? That's a false statement. If we have a false statement, then our answer is no solution. Okay, so that was 1 through 7 of the study guide for Chapter 3.